and I'm here today to welcome you and thank you for joining us for our AI Office Hour, separating signal from noise, an evidence-based framework to AI's impact. Today, you'll hear from Thomas Hancock, a cognitive scientist, AI innovator, and senior manager of AI LLM technology architecture at Accenture. Over the next hour, you will hear how AI systems can accomplish specific goals with limited supervision, and how workforce learning is reshaping organizational strategy and the partnership between humans and AI. Today's discussion is one of many that the Chamber plans to host in 2026 to help your business leverage AI's benefits. I want to thank Accenture and Tom for partnering with the Chamber and leading today's discussion. Before we get started, I have a few items to note. After Tom's presentation, he will take questions. If something he says prompts a question, please put it in the comments column. We will be monitoring questions and will try to address as many as we can at the end of the presentation. A recording of this session will also be posted on the Chamber's website next week. And now it's my pleasure to turn this session over to Tom Hancock.
Hello. Thank you for the introduction, and pleasure to meet everyone today. As Megan mentioned, my name is Tom Hancock. I'm actually a cognitive experimental psychologist here at Accenture, and my PhD is in the cognitive experimental field, and with a specialization in memory, statistics, research design, etc. Prior to coming to Accenture, I've 20 plus years in academia, and I've been with Accenture for about 4.5 years. And what we're going to do today is kind of just have a I guess, a casual conversation about what AI is, what it is capable of doing, how we can think about it. And so it's not meant to be, as you can see on here on this list, it's not meant to be something where we do a deep dive into the technical components of it, but instead it's having a conversation of kind of making sure that we all have an awareness and a common terminology of what we're working with. And with that awareness, understanding when it is complex, when it's not complex, and in those complex situations, how do we take an approach that is evidence-based, that is metric-driven, to determine if what we're thinking about deploying, in this case AI, is it the right call for you? So that is the purpose of today. And the call should take roughly around 35 minutes, approximately, as far as the presentation time, with plenty of opportunity to discuss or ask questions afterwards. So when it comes to the starting point right here, I'm not going to drain any of these slides. We all understand that there's a lot of opportunity where AI has been discussed or put in the papers as far as the value it potentially brings, the opportunity to increase revenue, increase individuals' productivity. I mean, the sky's the limit on where we're seeing AI being applied. Now, understanding that piece, that it's being applied really across the spectrum. I mean, even at work, it's also being applied at home. I've even seen it where individuals are using it, using AI to help with some of their children's activities. All of these different applications, when we're thinking about just in the workforce alone, what we see is that there's a little bit of a disconnect, that there's a lot of organizations, big and small, that are attempting to use AI. As you can see right here, this is from a study, I believe, from MIT last year. And in this study, what they discovered, and this was more conversations with CIOs, CEOs, et cetera, that they were finding that 80% of these companies were and had invested a significant amount of revenue or income into AI. However, out of those, that significant investment, only 40% actually moved to pilots, and then on top of that, only 5% were actually effectively deployed. And that is pretty. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about it that way, because they're seeing the opportunity. However, the chance to actually have a large ROI with its use becomes, I mean, very, very small. And there's a disconnect there. And I think maybe one of the reasons behind that disconnect is that when we think about AI, and it's so easy. I mean, we have like I mean, just some of the large ones, Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini, et cetera. When we think about it, it's almost like a ubiquitous tool, right? I mean, it can apply anywhere, and it seems so easy and straightforward to utilize. But I think the thing that we kind of fall into a trap is that most strategies might focus on an individual tool. So a specific AI model, or what we call LLM, or agents, which we're also going to be talking about, but they're very specific in their focus. While that does bring some impact, the issue is that when we're thinking about actually deploying AI to solve a specific use case or multiple use cases, it's not an individual tool, but it's actually trying to understand what type of a system do you need to design. So kind of like an ecosystem or an architecture that you need to put in place to actually make it effective. And the other piece that I'll add to that, and this is one of the key things I always want you to think about when we're discussing or thinking about AI and its use, is are we creating an opportunity where the AI can learn? So that's a key thing that we're going to be coming back to several times, is can it learn? And we'll discuss some of the factors that impact that. So when we're thinking about and just to make sure everyone's clear, there's no test on what's on the right hand of the side of the screen. This is just an illustrative example. But when we're thinking about applying AI or and possibly just using one AI tool, so this could be like using an agent that is focused on one specific task that you might have in front of you, a very simplistic task. That's the only thing it does. Well, and if it's a really simple task, very narrow, then a tool could very well suffice. However, when the task becomes more complex, so when the task becomes kind of more involved and more entangled than other components, maybe there's trying to just make a decision where there might be politics involved, there might be logistics involved, you have to have a good customer management database, all of these different pieces, and also understanding your products and everything else, speed and response times, how accurate is the system. When it becomes more complex, that's when we're talking about the stuff on the right-hand side. So here, what you see is kind of like at this example right here is kind of like for a mock-up upskilling, or basically how to train your workforce, and what that could look like, what type of agents you would invoke, what those agents might be connected to, different databases, could be connected to internal HR information systems, could be connected or also linked to external, like maybe ONET, having an understanding of what content is out there, so what content's out there, I won't dive any further than that. And also maybe its impact on learning professionals, and how can learning professionals learn from the interaction that people, like the actual employee, as they're trying to interact and learn about a specific task or ability or develop some kind of a new skill. The types of questions that are being asked could also be fed over to the learning professional as well. And so that's what I'm talking about, is when you look at this slide right here, again, no quizzing on this. When you look at this, is for you to understand and appreciate that in order for a system, as the complexity of your use case or task it grows, the more interconnected it needs to be. Now, kind of to break it down a little bit, just simplistically, you can kind of think about, like, if you have a use case and you're trying to determine impact, or you're trying to create impact or value. Some of the aspects that you need to consider is, first off, how are people going to use it? Are they going to accept it? Are they going to trust using it? Or are they going to be much more apprehensive of its use? And as I was kind of referencing, what type of specific task are you expecting it to perform? That then kind of flows into what model, what LLM you want to use. And we also have to understand what is the complexity of the overall task. On top of that, we have to understand that architecture, as I was alluding to on that past slide. And then, and even larger than that, is that the enterprise scale, and looking at it how it's connected across your business or across your unit. And so all of these things, and the intent, the simple intent of this slide right here, is to call out that making a decision to use AI or not is not just simply, okay, this looks like it might fit. It's understanding the complexity and all the different gears or the components involved. And if one of these cogs is missing or busted, if you want, going along with that, then it's not going to work overall. So that being the case, how can we think about this process? And this is where, when you're deciding, looking at this complexity and this, just even this simplistic view right here can seem overwhelming. But when you understand that there's a lot of moving pieces, then you can kind of come back and ask some of these questions right here. And this is where those metrics are tying into KPIs. So if we look over the human piece and look and asking the questions, all right, are individuals using it? Do they trust it? And then as far as the specific task, when you're engaging in an LLM, is it doing it and performing it and give you output that's reliable? When the system gets messy, does it collapse? And we're looking at that complexity piece. And then looking at that architecture as you scale, think of this as, does it communicate? And does it communicate well as you build other features and components and add databases and other models or other agents to your system? Are they communicating the way that you want them to? And lastly, the enterprise, is it, when you look at the logistics, is it something that you should pursue? So every single time we use an LLM, we know, the token cost and et cetera, that plays along with that. So every time you ask it something and receive something from it, that costs money. And then also thinking about latency times. Is the task that you're asking it to perform something that is time sensitive? Is it not? So there's a lot of different pieces that we need to explore. So these are some of these questions, and the metrics or the KPIs that you associate with each one of these are crucial as you try to unpack and determine, how do I use AI effectively and how do I optimize it the best? All right, so that was just a brief overview, and I want to do kind of a little bit of a, level the playing field and level set on what AI is, and like specifically what are LLMs, and then some things to consider, and then also move over to what agents are. So first up, when we're talking about an LLM, and I'm not going to dive into the different types that we see up on the right-hand side, different types of AI. But when we're talking about LLMs, I just want you to consider this, is that every LLM simplistically is distinguished by, on the data it's trained on, so specifically some of the really large models like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and et cetera, some of those are just trained on a massive amount of data. And they're takes all this information, audio, visual, text, et cetera, converts it into a form, like a mathematical form, and kind of draws some association connections from that. So some models are trained on a lot. Others are trained only maybe, or on a lot of different modalities. Others are trained on maybe just visual or images. Others are trained just on audio. Some are just trained on video. And so that's one of the things I need to make sure that we're all aware of, is that every single LLM is trained, it has different data it's trained on. Next piece, reinforcement. So how well does the LLM learn from your feedback, and how much memory does it have for like kind of past conversations? So if the reinforcement model, if it's not tuned to your specific use case or business case, it may not work right. And so you can put all the information in it that you think that is relevant, but the output you receive from it might not, meet your specific needs. And then lastly, the inferences. And I think of inferences more like kind of like the context. So if you think about this is more like if I'm doing something in the media space. So if I'm trying to do something like in marketing, so I could have an LLM that is more geared towards marketing type of use cases and not geared towards some other scenario. So these are the reason I call these three components out, or these three aspects or phases of LLM development, is when you look at training and you look at reinforcement and you look at inferences and you understand how they can all vary. So there's a lot of variability in those. When you think about that, that kind of unpacks this huge array. I mean, there's all kinds of different LLMs out there, but when you're thinking about LLMs and these models, knowing that there's the training and the reinforcement of the inferences are different amongst them, knowing those subtle nuances helps you understand, you know what, if I am pursuing something that is heavy reasoning based, then you can see, like I have up here, the Gemini 2.5 Pro on Grok and Claude 4.5. And I'm sure these examples are already, outdated as of just yesterday, probably. But you can see those right there. If I want to focus on images or videos, so that helps us understand that as I'm exploring the application of AI, I need to also consider what specific use case I'm pursuing. And then once I understand that, I can kind of take this whole myriad of confusion and all these models that are being created almost on a daily basis, and understand I need to focus maybe on these 5 or 6 or these 3. And that at least helps narrow my thought process, and I don't need to be as overwhelmed because it's much more more parameters and kind of boxed in, so you know what you're pursuing. You know what are some possible options you might want to be able to go after. So when it comes to this process then of determining which model you should use, understand broadly, like you see right here, the reasoning, the latency, the everything else. So understand what you're looking for and what are some of those performance metrics that are of value to you and what are not. Next piece right here is understanding the context. So when you test it, does it give you reliable feedback? Does it give you the information or the answers or the output that you find of value? And that's absolutely an essential task right here. So this is where that evidence comes back in. So as I mentioned earlier with those gears and the complexity of AI, the things to consider when we're talking about just simply deploying one model, we need to think about some of these aspects right here. And it needs to be evaluation based because, as we all know, the humans, here's a psychologist speaking, right? So humans might find something cool or engaging, but it doesn't necessarily mean it brings value. And so I cannot stress enough of making sure that you identify the metrics that are important to you and your teams. And then once you've identified those metrics, then evaluate the use of the models based off of those. And using those metrics, and then you can converge on, like what I see on the step 3 right here, is that what is the best fit? And the thing to stress right here is that, like as I have along the bottom tagline, the best model doesn't exist, only the best model for this job proven by experimentation. All right. You can tell I'm a little bit passionate about this space since I used to teach undergrad and graduate level courses in this space for decades. All right. So having said that, now I want to move into a conversation of what agents are. And this is obviously in the last year and a half, agents are all the buzz. And we can see that this evolution of these stages of technology and the tech revolution that we're seeing is that we had our initial classical kind of AI 21, 22, as far as that was more public facing. And then we've seen the generative AI where when ChatGPT came out with their first release, everybody was jumping on like, look how fun this is, and asking it questions and seeing it generate different types of answers. Now, what we've seen again in the last year and a half is this explosion of agentic AI. In this agentic AI, the key difference, and I'll unpack this more in a minute. The key difference is that it's no longer just asking, it's no longer operating just off of a prompt. And I'll discuss this. It's now goal directed. It's goal driven. And that's going to be a key thing that I'll explain here in a minute. And lastly, there's projections anywhere in the next couple of years of moving to generalized artificial intelligence, which is a much larger scale, kind of, in essence, a human-like type of AI. But that's not for the topic, not for discussion here. That's probably more of a theoretical discussion at the second. So now going into what agents are. So again, we're all familiar with what we see on the left-hand side, these LLMs. And this is the stuff that originally, like when ChatGPT came out, where you ask it a question, so a prompt, you give it like, create me this, or generate whatever. You give it that specific question, and then what it does, the LLM would go through, based on the training of that specific model, what information it was trained on, how it's set up for reinforcement, how it can hone in, and then also how inferences are made and understand context. Take that into account and then give you a response. But it's all driven like off of you asking a specific, having a specific request, right? So that's the key piece of an LLM, very simplistic. Now, what I did here is you can see I tried to keep the color coding the same. So I moved the light purple over here, the dark here, and then the same, I guess, mid purple down here at the bottom. And where you have prompt on the left-hand side, so like a specific question that you would type into a chat box. Over with agentic AI, what you do, the difference here is that it is goal directed. So you give it a goal. So you are X, or like you are a researcher, you are a manager of said department. And so you kind of give it a persona. And once you give it that persona, what it does then, it now is goal directed, and it's thinking the way the programming is set up is like, I need to achieve X. Now, much like a human being that has all of our sensory receptors, right? So our sense of touch, hearing, taste, smell, sight, etc. Just like all of those, an agentic or an AI agent has this ability to perceive the environment. And so we have data coming in. So this could be data from a data, like maybe you have it connected to a database. It's maybe looking at images that you've sent it, or a video file. And so whatever you provide it, much like a human senses, this is the ability to provide it context in essence. Think about that, just so you're simply giving it context. So whatever type of problem that you're trying to solve, or a use case at work, you want to provide it as much context as possible. That's the perceived piece. So now it has a goal, and it now understands the context in which it sits. Okay. Now what we see here, the next step is the plan. And so the plan stage, you can see here's the LLM that we see on the left-hand side. We see it kind of this churning symbol. Over here, we also see it. So it has a goal, it perceives, and now it starts thinking about how to achieve it. And it has the information from the environment, or the context, but now it's also pulling in additional data because remember, every LLM is trained on a large corpus of information. And because of that, it's now able to take all this context for your work context or problem context that it pulled in from the perceived, the environment stage. And now it's pulling all this information in from its own database that it was trained on, all the data that it was trained on. And so it can take the context it's sitting in, what it already knows, and come up with a plan. Then it can generate a potential action. And then from that action, it reflects and it determines, does this get me closer to where I want to be? And so that's where we see that reflection stage coming back up. And if it thinks it's a relatively close approximation to its goal, it will give you the response. If not, it goes back to the plan stage. All right. I know this was probably the most technical slide there, but just wanted to make sure everyone could see that. So that's what an agent is. Now, what does an agent look like in essence, a quote unquote, a team? So when we look at agents in a team, so this is moving from a simple use case to a more complex scenario. When we look at a more complex scenario, we need a larger team, just like you and I, when we were giving a problem to solve at work. We need to lean on our teammates or our colleagues, our different like reporting structures, et cetera. And this is really, in essence, the same thing when we take an individual agent and now put it in a team of agents or an ecosystem of agents. We now have, you can think of up here as the maybe the CEO or someone in a C-suite, some form of leadership, and they're trying to figure out like what do I need to know about my business this week, and you could give it more details, and from that it then asks maybe different department heads. So those are the super agents, and you could have a super agent that is designed for solving or answering just finance questions or something in the finance realm. And you could have another one based on operations and et cetera. And then from there, that's where they're made up of these various teams. And then these teams are drilling down further. So you could think of like down here, these tools like QuickBooks, Slack, Gmail, something like that. Those could be down at the tool level. These have there's no decision pieces in there. They don't decide, okay, you want to do this, and I'm going to determine this is the best approach. These are just simply things that do one thing and they do it well. The agents, the utility agents are more specialized, and they call the different tools that they need. And so you can see this level of specialization from, in essence, leadership or the orchestrator, and then delegating on down. And the key thing here also remember is that if you have a very simple task, you might only need a tool and you don't need an ecosystem of agents. As your task complexity increases, the more of this structure that you see here of orchestrators and super and utility tools, et cetera, expands. And so that's something to consider. Like when I was a department chair, I had 32 faculty and 1,000 students. And from there, I had specific reporting structures to me. And that's the same thing. And every one of you on this call you're nested in your own reporting structure and you're basically your own organization. And that's in essence what these agents are here. All right. So that's one piece right there. So that's the thing to, again, stress is going back to that evidence and figuring out what your metrics are. And that helps determine the complexity of the task and the complexity of the architecture you set up. Now, so this is just the agents, all right? So other things to consider, all right? So as we unpack this more, we also have the human versus the agentic role. And you could have an architecture setup where you can see on the left-hand side, so these are human roles, where you assign tasks and you give it to an orchestrator and it reports back to you later. You could have another one where the human is very much deeply embedded in the task. You could also have another one where the human is actually sitting in essence, a swarm of agents. And so it's almost like an equal reporting structure and everyone's throwing ideas around. So that's one thing. And that's every single one of us, again, at work, in our own organizations, we set up our own reporting structure. And so that's one thing to consider that you can also set up here. And then we also have the different agentic architectures. So as you can see here on the screen, we can have sequential and parallel, et cetera. And each one of those might be more appropriate for your given use case than another one. Again, as long as you focus on the evidence and the metrics piece, you can walk through this and determine in a reasoned way which is the best approach to pursue. So coming back to all of this, so I know I've just thrown a lot at you. Going back to that, we can think about, when do we want to create agents? So when you need, like, where the use case, there's reflexibility, it might be a complex or an open-ended task. Those are situations where creating an agent's a good idea because they're appropriate. Now, if you have a use case where it's a specific algorithm, you enter X and you always get this. Well, if you always get the exact same output and it fits into an algorithm, do not use agents. You don't need to use AI. And so that's the understanding, is that the use of AI should go along with, or should first be driven by, the task or use case, or the complexity of that. Those aspects should feed into and determine if you should even decide to use AI or implement it. Now, the last couple of pieces I want to get into is, let's talk about when AI is effective, right? And as you see on this slide right here, we have 3 different types, or I broke up 3 different types. And there's some interesting work that just came out of Anthropic that just published last week that also confirms this idea here. Using AI is really good for routine work. So there can be flexibility. So there can be variability in the way people report information, et cetera. But when it's all said and done, there's some pretty good, like, I guess, bumpers when we think about bowling, or different parameters that are set in place. It's pretty firm. So when that exists, using AI or using agents is probably a pretty good idea. Again, I'm stressing that there is variability in the environment, but the ultimate goal is very clear cut. Now, as we move over to going from left to right, expert work and strategic work, now what we see, like medical records, legal documents, financial risk analysis, these are still good scenarios for the use of AI or agents. However, there needs to definitely be a human in the loop, because you're starting to get near that kind of edge case, those exceptions. And also, that's one piece, and there's also significant ramifications, obviously, like when it comes to like the medical field or legal field. And then lastly, the strategic workspace, as far as maybe merger and acquisitions, crisis management, stuff along those lines. Those you can use AI to provide information and give you, I guess, points to consider. But that's where it should be almost primarily human led, because you're not borderline sitting on edge cases. You are an edge case, and everything in that strategic work has significant ramifications. All right. Now, having said this, one of the key things that I guess was inherent or implicit in everything I was just discussing is when you think about the level of constraints. So the constraints in routine work are pretty high. Like, I expect this specific output, whereas the constraints in the strategic work is much more obtuse. It's not clear. So when we're thinking about that, and that's going to be a key piece to kind of think about what the human plus AI workforce or given day here that we see in the very near horizon, what it might look like. So if you look at human-based processes, so think about, like, this could be the example right here I want to walk through is an example of either myself working in the context of a team. So individuals are assigned specific tasks, or it could just simply be myself, where I need to perform something or create something, and that has a bunch of sequences that need to be sequential tasks that need to be performed, or maybe they're done in parallel, whatever. But I mean, so to just understand that there's a flow to either myself working in teams or myself trying to problem solve. There's a logical order, like a logic model. So there could be a human role A, where they're given a task, there's some constraints, There could be another situation where human role B, maybe they're working in multiple tasks and there's some, again, specific constraints. So every one of these people in today, they're working on something in this specific example, and this is a simplistic example, that every single one of them are performing something. So individual A, B, C, D, they're all working on something and they all have constraints on what they're delivering to the next person. So that right there, if we look at specifically the constraints along the bottom, and as we just mentioned on the previous slide, when it's the most effective routine work and when it's not the most, when it's probably the most questionable, or situations where we kind of raise a red flag, that strategic work, it's all about constraint. Strategic work is unconstrained, whereas routine work has a high level of constraints around it. So understanding that and keeping that in mind, now let's think about the use of AI. So now you look at the very top, and what if, compared to that previous slide, you have now AI role A. And this is a highly constrained situation. And that could wind up, that could wind up like where you give it the information and it gives you that output that is, we already know it has to be in a specific format and meet certain criteria. Well, then maybe there's human role E plus AI. So basically what you see in the E and the F is that everything that was done in the previous slide, A through D, is now being done by AI role A because everything was highly constrained. But now we see along the bottom, especially calling out that partially constrained. When it's partially constrained, which is more of that, like that middle column on that previous slide that I showed, that's where AI can help you, but it still needs a human in the loop. And so that's where we see that previous task has now been collapsed by AI role A. And now you have a new role where you're partnering with AI because AI is partially constrained, but if there's still a lot of variability that needs to be have human oversight. So then we can see AI role C. Here's another one of highly constrained. And then lastly, if it's unconstrained, maybe that last aspect, that human role D, this new one, this is where the human's fully in there. It has all the information that's been pulled from either AI specific tasks or human plus AI tasks, has all that information that's fed up to it. And now that individual has to make a decision, or it could be that strategic work. And so that's kind of a way to kind of conceptualize how we can use all the stuff we've been talking about, how we can best utilize it. And again, this all needs to be evidence-based. So you need to do some trial runs to see on any one of these aspects, does like an AI role C, is it reliable? And you have to do that initial testing before you can really implement it into your workflow. So some of the key pieces here, just a couple more slides. Some of the key pieces right here is to understand that there is no question, will work change, right? That's not a question. As you can see right here, it's going to happen. The opportunity that we have right now, is to understand, like what I was just showing you on the previous slides, what skills and role designs, learning, talent transitions, etc., that we need to put in place today in order for us to best utilize and understand what tomorrow looks like for us. So again, the process is going to change, but as we all, are familiar with, like, especially from the field of economics, there are not a finite number of jobs in our society. Every single time that there's a new innovation, a specific, a specific set of tasks that someone did on like for building X, now they're winding up doing something else because there's a new need that arises. And so it's that understanding of that we need to determine, how do we configure what tomorrow looks like, and understand and to put people in place starting today, or at least projecting out what tomorrow might look like for them. So the last piece right here that I'm going to discuss is kind of understanding, okay, having said all of this, I know we've covered a lot. having said all of this, like, how do we determine what we should or should not move forward, especially if you have a lot of projects that you're kind of playing around with? So some of the pieces or some things to understand is that the evidence piece. So again, making informed decisions, determining what are your KPIs, what are the metrics that you value the most. And so you have a couple right here as far as task performance and comparing the AI output to a human output, et cetera. So those are some aspects that you need to take into account. The more evidence you have, the more confident you are that you can roll it out. And then the other aspect is that operations logistic piece of how much does it impact your workflow? How much does it cost? How reliable is it, et cetera? And when you take these two into account, you can create a 2x2 matrix where what I'm calling the evidence confidence matrix, where you have the evidence strength on the left-hand side right here, and then you have the operational readiness along the bottom. And from there, if you're highly confident and you know, like, you have the data and you also know that the performance metrics are there, then you can move towards deploy. However, if you're low either on operational readiness or the evidence area, then that's where you need to pump the brakes a little bit and conduct a little more research before you determine if you want to actually deploy it. And so hopefully this helps you kind of conceptualize and kind of gives you a loose, sense, or a loose set of benchmarks or constraints or things to consider when you're determining, okay, should I proceed with this specific use of AI or this specific use case, or do I need to sit back? And this gives you kind of at least these 4 quadrants of scale, research, pilot, or deploy. And with that, really the main takeaway here, so this is just the last couple comments. The main takeaway here is that, yes, the AI brings a lot of value, revenue growth, and increased productivity for us. But we need to understand AI. We need to understand the model, understand the use case, understand the complexity. All of those pieces come into play. And as we account for those, we need to make sure we have we need to have metrics so we can make informed decisions at each one of these stages. And as long as we keep it that way and keep it kind of simple of, okay, I know here are the factors, here's what I need to evaluate, then that's going to ultimately lead you into much improved ROIs and being able to optimize the use of AI. And that brings my conversation to a close.
Hey, we have a few questions from the audience, and anyone that is on the webinar can continue to submit questions in the comment column. Are there certain industries that are best suited for agents?
Yeah, great, good question. So one of the things that we see is that kind of universally what we see is that the use of agents in back office operations is where we see some of the highest ROI. And so that's kind of, again, ubiquitous across, any industry if it's back office. Now, when we move into more forward-facing fields where there are heavy constraints, certifications, regulations, that's where AI can struggle. And so I think that's one of the things where you need to have, more guardrails, more evidence to make that decision as you're moving into industries that are more heavily regulated than others.
So the one slide that you had kind of depicted how the overlay with the human versus the agents. The other question that came in is it safe to assume all agent work needs a level of human oversight?
I would say it depends. I would say yes. Yeah. So yes, I would answer yes, but it depends on the level of risk involved. And so if the task is rather menial or low level of risk, you can have reporting structures or dashboards set up where the human can come in and double check, but it's not on a case by case, or it's not even done in batches. It's much larger than that. And so the level of risk and the variability would determine how much human in the loop you need. Always need it, but I guess it changes, it slides on a continuum.
Is it fair to assume that any business that wants to kind of look into the idea of using agents, like how would they get started? Like they would
Well,
need help?
sorry.
Would they need help? Like, I mean,
Well, I think initially there's a lot of with just simply basic uh, um, applications like I think like Copilot and etc. There's a lot of them where you can go in and start playing with agents, and so you can create the agents, and some of them even have the ability where you can have other agents talk to to other ones as well, and so you can kind of do it at a kind of a risk-free kind of playing around, I guess like a sandbox in essence to build them initially. It's when you actually want to start integrating and making them larger in scope. That's where I think reaching out to professionals to help guide you through that process is very valuable. But I think the initial proof of concept, that those POCs, I think you could use some of like the out of the box agents that are out there that you can create, go in. I teach like as at Accenture, we're upskilling, I think 600,000 plus of our employees in the agentic AI. And in that course, we're teaching every single one of them how to create agents. And that's the same thing that I think any organization could do.
what are some good measures of time saved because of AI adoption? Maybe money saved too.
Mhm. Well, time saved is that I was fortunate enough to conduct a couple studies with Stanford and MIT over the last couple of years in this space, and one of the things when I was working with a set of some of our teams in India is that you need to first look at the workflow of an individual or a team and kind of break out and develop that flow chart of tasks and determine where in that flow chart do you need the human in the loop and what aspects can you kind of hand off, kind of like those last couple of slides I was showing, right? Some of those highly constrained, where can I bring it in? And so when you look at the initial workflow of an individual or a team and understand which ones, so it's a convoluted answer, I think, which ones are absorb or take up the most amount of time. I think focusing on those aspects of your workflow that suck up the most time, seeing if AI can come in, because I've seen teams implement agents, but where they've implemented them, they're at such a minuscule task that it's not saving anyone. It's not saving any time or any at all. And so it's taking into account what is the heavy lift for the team today, and can AI do that part?
Okay, another question. It says research shows 95% of AI investment does not return an ROI. Most all companies are throwing in AI over antiquated systems and not redesigning their existing systems. How do we convince organizations to do this baseline necessity?
Yeah, I mean, it's the um, basically what in the field of cognitive psych we call like functional fixedness, where where we typically keep doing the same thing over and over again, and we expect, I mean, like we think that that is the best approach, and what we're finding is that some organizations think that I can introduce AI and have it do the exact same process that we do today, thinking that the way humans perform tasks are the only way to perform a task or the only way to complete a task. And the struggle is to help leaders understand that when we bring in AI, AI might actually redesign the entire task because the way that the limitations that you and I have as human beings, AI doesn't have all of those. It has limitations other places, and so it might reconfigure and redesign the entire process and help us understand where we can best utilize it in this new workflow, and also understand where we need to have that human in the loop throughout that process. And so yeah, I don't know if I'm answering that question well, but it's really trying to help leaders understand that the status quo doesn't have to exist anymore. That we can kind of re-envision a new configuration of workflow where humans and AIs complement one another. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges is to bring that to their attention.
Can an agent be created to be the quality assurance, for example, to check to see if the final work follows a required template?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, they definitely can, and especially you can put a significant number of guardrails in place for it to really give you a lot of confidence that what it's producing meets your set criteria.
Are businesses investing in hiring consultants and even full-time AI engineers, strategists to help businesses access the issues and ramifications you discussed today?
Well, I don't have a direct answer to that one, but I would lean towards that, like that previous comment where 95% of businesses are not finding ROI with the use of AI. Is that I would lean towards the belief that they believe because of how easy it is to no code or low code agents, where you and I can go in and we can just write up, do this, and like here's a scenario. Because it's so easy to create that, I would probably argue that a lot of organizations are not leaning enough on experts to bring them into the conversation and help them move past this. Okay, you see the capability and the potential of using AI, but now let's refine it and let us bring the best optimized system for you. And so I think that's where the ease of use and the ease of creating them is causing that 95%. I mean, no ROI and just no benefit from it because it's not being thought through at more of a strategic level, of an evidence-based level.
Do you have any direction for resources when it comes to cost planning with AI?
Um, there are some, like when you can go to some of the different companies like Anthropic and OpenAI, and there are some where you can run through scenarios of what the costs are. Another one I think might be an interesting place to go to would go to Stanford Helm. It's HELM, and that organization at Stanford has a lot of benchmarks on LLM models. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some of the cost components are built into that website as well.
As we redefine division of labor with AI, how do you think markets in the short term and long term will react to moving from human agents to AI agents without causing major disruptions to the financial markets?
The questions are getting progressively worse or more challenging, not worse. No, that's
Seems like
no, that's a
giving
good
people a
question.
lot to think about.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like when you look at like the impact on the workforce, impact on the environment, all of those pieces, and I feel like the one of the key things, like again, maybe going back to those conversations and working with experts and SMEs in the AI space, is to help organizations understand how do you set up your workforce to move forward. Because I think if organizations are not thinking about the impact of AI and what tomorrow's workforce might look like, if they're not thinking about that today, then it's going to come on very suddenly and disrupt the entire organization. And they might find themselves, an organization could find themselves the equivalent of years behind everyone else because they didn't implement the technology first and foremost, or didn't think about it, didn't prepare their workforce for it. And then that's where I kind of jumped ahead, and then they didn't implement it in time. And so I think it's that strategic work that needs to be done today in order for our workforces of tomorrow. And I think as at a societal level, for us to understand the pros, like the pros and cons, like when AI is best utilized and when it's not. And like one of the things that we see that from drawing on other literature, because I do a lot of most of my work focuses in the agentic space. Very highly informed individuals understand how to use AI in a very objective manner, and they know how to use it and know when to use it, etc. Those people that are very comfortable with it are dangerous in the sense that, I use AI for everything. But they don't understand the training and the reinforcements and the inferences models and everything else, all that stuff behind it. And so they over rely on it, and they're not critical thinkers about it. And so I think that's another key piece, is not only that strategic thought process of leadership, but also making sure that your workforce is well informed of the capabilities of AI.
Okay, we have time for a couple more. How can companies account for the rapid evolution of new AI tools, version upgrades, yet ensure that what they are building and investing in today is not outdated in 6 months?
Another good question. Well, I guess one of the key things is that if you're creating like a large, you're taking a strategic approach and designing the ecosystem. When you design the ecosystem and you set it up in such a way that you have the right data connected, you have the right individuals seeing it, you have the overall structure set in place as different models come up. So we can even think of again, ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and the other ones. I'm just sticking with the main ones. Those update every so many, like sometimes 6 months, 3 months, a year, etc. And as long as you have that infrastructure in place, you can change or move up with those new models, but everything is still, in essence, everything is still linked together. So it's almost like, so Detroit, think of a car, and you can kind of pull an engine out and put a new engine in, but when you hook it up and you hook the transmission up and everything else in that car is ready to go. And I think it's the same way, is if you, as new models or more efficient models come out, you can also kind of do that plug and play if you have that ecosystem in place.
Okay, this will be our last question. Do your AI trust frameworks underpin the importance of data governance for effective AI governance?
So can you say that one more time, please?
Do your AI trust frameworks underpin the importance of data governance versus effective AI governance?
Yeah, I would argue so. Yes, that I would actually kind of back up and say, I don't think I would distinguish. In essence, you almost don't really want to distinguish between AI trust and AI governance, because if you have the proper AI governance in place, that trust will follow. Well, I guess, yeah, I'll couch it that way, is that the AI governance must be established first before that trust can come into play. Because if people lean only on that trust piece and just assume that it's doing the right noble thing, that's gonna go in the wrong direction for all of us.
Okay, Tom, thank you so much for taking your time today to share your expertise with the Chamber audience. Again, this session will be posted on our website later this week or early next week. And our attendees today will also get a survey with contact information from Accenture for if they want to reach out further. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.